Let's go now to a whole market of pain, and that's Europe, of course. The week's not starting well, with the new Greek Prime Minister and his Finance Minister taken ill and unable to get to the EU summit later in the week. Meanwhile, Germany's telling Greece to stop whinging and get cracking with austerity. Well, I'm joined from London now by Westpac senior economist James Shugg. James, welcome.
Vicky, good morning. Good evening for you.
Well, thank you. George Soros, that famous hedge fund fellow, thinks it's make or break this week. But even in Eurospeak terms, this summit has got to be a damp squib if the new head of Greece isn't going to be there.
Well, look, the point is you've got to have low expectations going into these big summits. This is number 19, I think, since the crisis began. If you don't want to be disappointed at the outcome. Really, it's not about all of the leaders getting together. There's really only two people that can sort out the problems in Europe, or at least can ensure that a situation is put in place such that Europe can work its way through the problems. And that's the President of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, and Angela Merkel. Merkel needs to soften the insistence on austerity so that the economies have a chance to grow. But that's going to cost the German taxpayer if that were to happen. And the ECB needs to support the bond market a lot more than they've been doing by buying the bonds of Italy and Spain to hold down their yields, hold those bonds till maturity and not take seniority over other investors, so that other investors will keep investing in those governments. That's what needs to be done.
What I don't understand, James, is that you say this, and yet we've got Angela Merkel this week almost hardening. Certainly, Wolfgang Schäuble came out very tough with his comments on Greece in the last 24 hours, and yet Spanish 10-year bond deals have gone back down to 6.4%. The market seems to be a little bit more comfortable. There's very conflicting signals here.
There are, and it's going to continue like this. I mean, the yields actually picked up a bit today in terms of the Spanish bond market, but compared to where they were last week, absolutely, they're back below 7%. I think the issue is that there's always an element of hope that something big will come from these big meetings. And there was some progress made last week between the French, Italian, Spanish and German leaders who met and agreed on a growth package. They made a lot of platitudes about growth and employment being important. So we are heading in the right direction, but it's just awesomely ridiculous that hugely powerful institution, the European Central Bank, is just sitting on the sidelines now, having made a good start at the end of last year with their long-term refinancing operations to support the banking sector. But now, I'm afraid, they really do need to support the sovereign debt market. The Bank of England does it, the Fed does it. It's really not such a terrible thing to do, but the Germans are absolutely dead against it. And without that happening, Europe just won't survive in its current form.
You say it's not such a terrible thing to do, but we've of course had the Bank of International Settlements, the central bankers bank, if you like, coming out again in the last 24 hours to say that all this money printing isn't really helping anyone, and it's doing a lot of damage to the credibility of a lot of the central banks.
I think that's a risk if we actually do see high inflation outcomes follow through from that. But we're not seeing that in the UK. We're not seeing that in the US yet. I mean, the risk in Europe is potentially deflation if the recession deepens, like we think it's going to, if confidence absolutely collapses because of the failure of the sovereign in Spain and with contagion onto Italy. I mean, there is just not enough money in Europe to bail out those two governments unless the ECB uses its balance sheet to support those markets. Now, that's not the solution in itself. All that does is give governments time to put in place the very difficult economic reforms and structural reforms that have to be in place for them to actually be able to survive in the strictures of a single currency. Now, it's going to cost the German, and what the Germans need to do, and the other northern economies, is allow fiscal transfers in the meantime, bigger ones than they have up until now, so that the insistence on austerity can be softened, which, after all, is killing people. I mean, and it is a very messy situation. There is no easy solution out of this, and I don't think this weekend or this week is going to deliver a result, unfortunately.
Well, we'll see how far we get. James Shugg, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Vicky.